Hello everyone! As I promised at the very end of my last tutorial, this time I'll show you how to actually do some basic texturing. So you'll see that I am in Blender for this. I actually only know how to do this stuff in Blender, but I've heard that it's quite annoying to do in SketchUp anyways, and that what a lot of people have done is that they took their SketchUp file, exported the OBJ, and then imported it into Blender purely for texturing. So even if you are using SketchUp as your modeling software, this still might be how you want to do your texturing. So, anyways, let's get on to the texturing. So, as I mentioned before in the last episode, texturing something means basically taking an image and wrapping it around one of your meshes, one of the things that you're modeling. So the first step to doing that is actually telling your program what textures you want to use, basically. So on Blender, I'm going to expand this out a little bit so that I can see this thing over here. It's called, if I were to hover over it, it's just this thing that's red and white. And imagine that this window, oops, sorry, did that very awkwardly. But imagine that this window just wasn't here at all. Let's see what this looks like, just a second. Okay, sorry, this was taking some time. If you have no idea how to even get there, what you do is you just select one of these little tabs in the corner, and you drag it out. And then you can change what it says in the corner here. You can change that to be some other kind of window type. And if you change that to be, let's see, where is it? Properties, you'll get exactly what I had here. So this is a window, this is a window. You can just set any window in Blender to show whatever you want. And this is the properties window. So, yeah, in the properties window, if you go to this red and white thing, here are the texture slots that you can mess around with. So I want to create a new texture. So I'm going to hover over one of these empty slots and hit New. So now I've started creating a new texture that I can use in this stuff, but I haven't actually really done anything yet to make it a texture. I have to load in an image before I can wrap the image around my mesh. So I can set the type of this texture to be image or movie right here, and load in my own image to use as a texture. So if I scroll down a little bit, you'll see image, open. So to start things off simply, I'll just use something I have right here, this green image. This is just a 32 by 32 pixel image that's entirely green. So if I open that, you'll see the preview is that this is a green texture. Just simple as that. So now I have a texture that my program recognizes that I can use, but I'm not actually using it yet. To actually apply it to something, I have to do this step called UV unwrapping. Well, what is that exactly? Well, you see, this cube right here, for instance, I can't just slap this texture right on it because my program, Blender, my modeling software, doesn't even know how to do that. It doesn't know where to put that image around. You have to do this step called UV unwrapping so I can see how to do it. So I have an image here, just a water bottle and a label. And imagine you wanted to make a label that you wrap around this water bottle, right? It really is just an image that you're applying to a 3D object. But how do you do that? Well, basically, you take this round section and you imagine what it would be like if you could kind of just unwrap it as if it was made out of paper. And then you'd be left, in this case, with just a rectangle, like you see right here. So UV unwrapping is basically just taking something 3D and imagining what would it look like if I could lay it flat and just put it on the ground. And then once you have it in that completely flat state, you can actually apply an image to it because images are flat and you can put images on flat things. So that may be a little bit weird to conceptualize, but let me now show you what it actually means to do UV unwrapping. So I have to open actually a new window for this. And just as I did before, I'm going to open a new window in Blender by going to one of these little diagonal lined sections and dragging up into an existing window. I can create this new window here. But I don't want to just see this 3D view. I want to see my UV unwrapping stuff wherever you do that. So if I click here to change what type of window this is, I can change it to be a UV/image editor window. And now I have this window at the bottom that will help me as I'm moving forward. So if we go back to my water bottle image, I don't really want to unwrap this whole water bottle. I'm only applying this texture to this round part of the water bottle, if you could imagine me UV unwrapping this water bottle in real life. So the analog to that is that if I go back into my modeling software, I have to actually pick which faces, which sides of this cube that I'm planning to actually texture. So I have to go into edit mode and select which of the faces that I want to unwrap. In this case, I want to unwrap the entire thing because I want to apply a texture to every side of this cube. So I'm just going to hover over my cube and press the L key on my keyboard, which will select every single face because I was in the face select mode right here. So now I have every side selected. So if I hit the U key on my keyboard, I hit just U, I can select unwrap, and you'll see this square here. Except it's not just one square. This is every face of my little mesh here, all laid one on top of another. For instance, if I were to just select one side, you'd see it's a pretty dim square. If I select a second one, it lit up a bit because this is two squares laid on top of each other. So if I select every square at once by holding over this and pressing L, you'll see it's very bright because I have 6 squares, one for each face. There's 6 faces, all being laid on top of each other in this 2D view. So what did I do just here? Basically, I took my cube, you can imagine it as the water bottle, and I took the round section of that cube and just basically unwrapped it as if it was made out of paper and got a 2D representation of what my cube would be like if I unfolded it and put it on the ground. So that's right here. The last step would be to click this button right here. This lets you apply to all of the faces you have selected your texture. See, I have the option to select this green texture right here because I created this green texture slot earlier. So if I hit that to apply it, because all of the 6 squares I selected are showing up here, I just applied that green texture to all 6 sides. It may not look like it, but that's because I'm in the wrong view type. If I just quickly change from this solid view type to this texture view type, you'll see that my texture now appears. Oh, and if you have been watching this video and are in over your head, make sure to watch those first 3 parts of the Blender tutorials that I linked in the description. So, anyways, you'll see that I just actually textured this cube. Now, once again, the steps to that was that I had to create a new texture slot. I had to choose its type to be this image or movie type. I had to load in the image I wanted to use for this texture. Then I had to select the faces that I wanted to unwrap, which in this case was all 6. I hit U on the keyboard, selected this unwrap option, and then I had all 6 faces appear one on top of each other, one on top of another, in this section right here. This UV/image editor window. Then I just selected which texture I wanted to supply to the selected faces, and I was able to put this green texture on my cube. So, this isn't actually a very good texture at all, honestly. It's just flat out green, doesn't really look good. If you wanted to make a serious ROM hack, this wouldn't really be something that's passable even. So let me show you actually how to get some great textures you can make use of. So I'm at this website that's called SMW Central. It's mostly a Super Mario World site, but it has some great 64 textures for Super Mario 64. So I'll be linking this in the description for sure, but if you scroll through this list, you'll see all sorts of huge dumps of textures from all sorts of different places. Like this one has 1,818 textures if you were to download from this. The one that caught my interest just now was this Mario Kart 64 rips by Mr. Green Thunder. So if I click on this, I can see a quick little preview, and some of these really caught my eye. I just liked them. I have, for instance, a very nice lava texture I can make use of, something that would actually look reasonable if I made it lava. So I just downloaded that, and it's in my folder right here, and I'm going to use this as my texture. So here I am back in my modeling software, Blender, and this time I'm going to unwrap this second cube here. So the the unwrapping technique I used before was really primitive in the sense that it overlapped all 6 of the cubes. A bit of a better unwrapping technique is if I hit U, Smart UV Project, and if I just go with the default settings, you'll see that it laid all 6 cubes out, all 6 faces out individually. So if I wanted to tweak how each of these 6 faces looked after being textured, I could do it a lot easier. But first things first, let me select that lava texture that I was really keen on. So I'll create a new texture slot. I'll select it as type image or movie. And I will open the image I want to be using for my texture. It was right. Here, I named it for making it easier to find. But if I open that image, you'll see the preview. Yeah, that's definitely lava. So since I have all 6 faces selected, you can see that all 6 of them are appearing right here. I will apply the lava texture on. So here's a problem though. This lava is really stretched out and doesn't actually look very good if you're looking at this. But I can make it so that it's a lot less stretched out by making the texture repeat, it's called. So if I hover over my cube and press L, I can get all 6 of my squares to appear again. And if I select all of them down here, I just used B to do a block select, I can actually change the size of that like paper that I unwrapped compared to the size of this image. And I can make it so that it repeats the image. So now if I look at my cube, it actually looks a lot better because it's not just using the same exact... it's not just using this image and stretching it across an entire face and making it look ugly. It repeated a bunch of times and now actually looks to be a reasonable scale. Just a quick note, this is post-commentary, but I think I forgot to mention this. The way that you actually change the size of this box in the UV image editor, the 2D representation of your object, is you just hit the S key on the keyboard. That lets you scale it up or down by moving the mouse, and you just click to finalize what you decide on. Alright, Celeste, I'm just going to show you that you can actually change the texture of the same mesh to make it a different texture for different sections of that mesh. So I didn't really explain that well, so let me show you through example. So if I'm going to switch to object mode, so I can select this object, because when you go into edit mode, it first checks which object you have selected before it lets you mess around with it. I will now start texturing this thing. So I can actually select the whole thing at once again by just pressing L, and I can unwrap it again by pressing U, and I'll choose just the Smart UV project. And now I just need to add another texture type because I want to use a brick texture type as well. So I'll just have my image or movie type selected. I'll type image open. If I go to desktop 64 junk, grips, I just want to load in this brick texture. So now I have a brick texture to use, and I'm also going to use this green texture. So imagine this green texture was just grass, so it looked a little bit better. I could get that from the SMW central site that I showed you, just a grass texture. But to just quickly chug on along, imagine that this just is actually good looking grass. So if I were to select all the faces that I want to be green, because I already unwrapped the the mesh, you can see that as I select things one by one, the 2D representation of my 3D objects pops up. So I selected everything I want to be green. You can see that every face I selected shows up in my UV section right here. So if I were to apply this green image, you'd see that all of this turns green, but only the things that I had selected that popped up in this UV window turned into be green. So then I can select separately these these faces over here. And if you remember, I unwrapped the entire object at once. So that's why these are appearing down here, even though I haven't just now unwrapped it. These faces have already been unwrapped. So if I just change this one to be brick, except it looks ugly, so let me block select and make those bigger compared to the reference image, the texture. You can see that I have this brick section here. So this is a really steep slope. Normally I'd slip down it, but I can just make this brick texture be non-slippery. So let me import this into ROM Manager and just show you a little bit about what I'm saying again. Actually, let me now just put a death plane underneath my level. So I have what I want my level to look like. It doesn't look very good, but this is just for a tutorial. I wanted to show you how to do this. I already exported what I have right here as this texture.obj file right here. But now I want to add a death plane. So I'm going to go to, let me make this smaller so I can see a little better. I will create a plane. Oops, sorry, let me undo that. I had everything selected, so it might cause a few errors. I meant to have everything deselected by pressing A. Anyways, let me create a plane, put it underneath my level, get a top-down view so I know how to position it. Press S to scale it. That's what I also was doing with the UV window down there. When I was making those squares all bigger or smaller, I was pressing the S key to scale them. So now I have my death plane. I just have to unwrap it It's a shape like the other things, so I have to be in edit mode to do that. I will unwrap it. I'll just use a very simple unwrap method because I don't care about this very much. I already had something selected, so I'll just have to overwrite that with something else. Let me make a new texture that I'm not using anywhere else for my death plane. I'll make it this red image. So I now have this red texture I can make use of. And if I just apply that red texture, I now have my death plane. It's bright red, but I'm only using this whole file for my collision map, so it won't actually be visible. So I'll just export this now as textured with plane, I guess. And now I'll show you in ROM Manager. Alright, so here I am in ROM Manager. I'll take out my fresh ROM, just a brand new ROM. Oh, now it's loaded. I'll just quickly replace Bob-Omb's Battlefield as always. And I'm just going to reinforce what I showed in the previous tutorial, which may not have made sense at the time, where now that I've shown you how to texture things, you'll see what changing the texture collision type does. So, as I mentioned, it was called textured, was my original model file. The one that looked like this without the death plane underneath. But since I don't want my death plane to actually show up visually, I select the model that has it separately as the collision. I hit load. The one that has the death plane in it, but which is otherwise the same. And you'll see that, yeah, my preview still looks the same, but my collision does involve that bright red plane underneath it. I just won't see it because it's only in the collision file. So now I can go to Collision Editor. I can change my thing that looks like lava to act as lava. You remember that slope I made out of brick? I don't want to slip on it, so I can make that be non-slippery. And the plane underneath my level, which in my collision file is bright red, since it's a different texture from everything else, I can safely select that as my death plane. So I'll save and exit, and I will load that as my Area 1. Before I move on, just if you find yourself jumping above your death plane and dying randomly while you're still way above it, you just have to move your death plane down a little more, because it actually influences way above itself. So anyways, let me save and show you that everything's working. Oh, but I first have to move the spawn point as always. I'm very good at forgetting that. So if I move the spawn point up, I will now show you the level. Alright, so here I hop right on in. And you'll see that I didn't actually set the green colored texture to do anything interesting, but when I jump on the lava texture, that sure is lava. Once again, the green texture doesn't do anything, but I set my brick texture to make it non-slippery. So even though this is a steep slope, I can walk up it completely normally. So, that, I think, just about covers everything I wanted to do in this tutorial. So these 5 tutorials may have had a lot of information that you had to process, but if you understood from beginning to end all 5 of these tutorials, you should be able to start making all sorts of levels on your own. If you didn't understand certain parts of the tutorials, then by all means feel free to ask me in the comments or on Discord. Last thing I'd like to say is a huge shoutouts to the Simple Flips Discord, which helped answer a lot of my questions and got me to the point that I am right now. Anyways, definitely let me know if you have any questions or comments, and fare thee well.